Welcome, listeners, to our Youth for Integrity podcast. I'm your host, Chaurai Mafundikwa, with the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development. This podcast is under the project Strengthening Institutions and Youth Agency in Zimbabwe Accountability Narratives, SIA. Today, we're going to be having a conversation about integrity. And as always, we're going to be talking to the youth because we believe that the youth have the solutions, the youth should participate in governance issues, and the previous situation where they are marginalized does not work. Today, my guest is Tapiwa Chiriga, who is a former student leader. Welcome, Tapiwa.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here, Taurai.
This podcast is made possible through the support of the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. We encourage you to follow us on Facebook, IG, YouTube, X, and Spotify under ZIMCODD, or Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development. Jumping straight into it, Tapiwa, what is corruption?
Taurai, corruption is basically the abuse of authority for personal gain. When one is entrusted with authority or at least responsibilities, and then they start using that position or that responsibility to then accrue personal gain. That is essentially what corruption is.
That's a very big definition. Let me ask you something. You spoke about trust and authority invested in people. What about us, the general youth who are just walking on the street? I'm not holding any public office, but can I be corrupt?
Yes, of course. But then you can be corrupt in collusion with those who have been entrusted with public authority. For example, if you want to get a passport in Zimbabwe, you might have to pay some fees that are not exactly official or legal. So you have been corrupt, but you are doing that in collusion with those who have power entrusted to them.
But let me ask you something. I go to the passport office.
Yes.
Is that corruption or it's a token of appreciation? Or if I may word it this way, is a token of appreciation corruption? Or is there a scenario where it's acceptable to give that token in a scenario where it's not?
There are scenarios where it is acceptable to tokens of appreciation, but they must be public. So when you get to a point where you have to do it clandestinely, when you have to get to a corner so that you can give somebody a drink in the common street lingo, it becomes corrupt and it becomes very illegal and unacceptable. Public officials are ordinarily not expected to be getting gifts for work done, which they are getting paid for by our taxes.
But now, Tapiwa, let's be real, my brother. Let's get down to it and be real.
Yes.
I want a passport. I need to travel. Probably this is after my A-levels. I need to go to the UK to get a degree. And I go to the passport office and they tell me we need $5, we need $10 for you to be able to get this passport. This is something that's very important to me.
Yes.
What is it in me that's going to stop me from doing that? Looking at the pros and cons of it.
What is going to stop you from doing that is that you should be following the normal and procedural channels. I think the passport example, I think it becomes less and less relevant because of the way things have been done recently there. I think they have improved in terms of efficiency. You might not see the need to be paying those bribes. So I think following the official channels is always important. If you see or find yourself in an official building, government building, where you are paying money that is not receipted, where you are paying money that has to be gifted to somebody without any receipts or without any public eye, then there's a serious problem. And you might encounter problems later in life. I saw somebody getting in trouble for having fake ZIMCODD O-level results. So imagine you pay for a service that is even fake. You pay for a service that will give you troubles later in this life. So you realize that the shortcut is always the wrong path, of course. So corruption comes in many forms. And the problem is that we have normalized it in this country and maybe in our very good and gifted continent.
You bring in a very interesting dynamic when you speak about efficiency, whilst you're speaking about our public offices. So corruption breeds where there is no efficiency. Like you're saying now, just because the passport office is more efficient, there's less corruption.
Yes.
So when there's inefficiency, there's a rise in corruption.
Yes. When the institutions are weak, when there are no strong institutions, when there is no efficient institution, when there is no motivation to work, when there is no motivation for honesty, it becomes very difficult not to be corrupt in a society. So when you realize that if an institution is functioning as it should in terms of the laws that establish it, there will be no need for you to go to the next corner because everything will be moving fast, efficiently, and actually going to the next corner to pay a bribe will actually take longer than it would ordinarily take if everything is efficient. So I think if we reform our institutions and make them better, you see that there will be no need for anyone to be corrupt.
But you're speaking about very big offices here. And we know our culture, we know our country. We
Yes.
are the youth.
Yes.
What place do we have to speak about these issues? Why should we participate? Why should we speak? Because I feel like now, simply because we've been excluded from participating, and I say this with a lot of reservation because we're not the same age, even though I'm still a member of the youth. But yeah, we have been excluded from these, from participating in governance issues, from
Yes.
participating in these offices because of our African culture. It's the adults that feel they have this space they have to claim this space and they have to, lead. Are we also supposed to lead? Are we supposed to participate? What do we do about the youth who are not participating because they are not being given that space?
One thing I love about your question is that you don't seem like you want us to beg for participation. And I love that because these are issues of power. These are issues of societal power, whether it's in politics, whether it's in government, whether it's in the economy. Participation in the political economy and in our society is always taken. I think my Shona friends would say, Simbari uye mundiro. Power does not come on a silver platter.
Okay.
So young people must claim their space. We must claim their space and claim our space. I'm sorry. So if you want to participate, if you want to end corruption, you would realize that the people who are in authority today will not give you that space willy-nilly. They will not give you that space freely. They will not just say, please come and help us fight corruption. Nobody will do that. One has to claim their space. One has to fight for their space. So young people must take control of the reins of government. Young people must take control of institutions, not only in politics, because we make the mistake of ensuring that our young people flood the townhouse. They flood parliament, and we think that we're done. We must also ensure that young people participate in the social and economic way of life of this country and take control of that. When we do that, then we can establish a new culture of honesty. We can establish a new culture of equality. We can establish a new culture of ethical dealings in as far as whatever we do.
So if I were to ask you, you speak about an ethical culture. I think before we had started recording, we were having a conversation about integrity.
Yeah.
What is integrity? How do you view integrity? What is it?
I think I would summarize integrity as a concept that encompasses ethical conduct, honesty, a good moral compass. And I think maybe for purposes of the Zimbabwean context, integrity is summarized best by what Section 194 of the Constitution says is principles of public administration in Zimbabwe, which every public office holder must live by. So it's essentially honesty, ethical dealings, and also having a strong moral compass in as far as what we agree on in Zimbabwe is a social contract. It's part of the social contract, in fact.
So if I cheat on my girlfriend, have
Yes.
I lost integrity?
Yes, you have no integrity. You have no integrity if you cheat on a girlfriend.
Okay, that's interesting.
Unless if you're honest about it. Because
Okay, if you then declare it. So even in the aspects of corruption,
Yes.
even if you participate in corruption, if
Yes.
you then declare it later, because I hear in certain institutions, if you are to receive a gift or a token of appreciation, it's
Yes.
okay as long as you declare it.
you must declare it. But there must be consequences. You can't continue receiving gifts. You can't continue. Imagine if for me to be able to sit on this table with you as your guest, I give you $500 and you declare it and we think that it's okay. And then the next guest next month also gives you $500 and then you declare, it becomes unreasonable. So you must equally face consequences.
So we are now looking at the grand scheme of things in our country.
Yes.
You're talking about there being measures that are imposed after people are alleged to have conducted or participated in corruption.
Yes.
But we've heard of something called the open court catch and release thing that's been happening in cases of corruption. What are your thoughts on that?
I think sometimes, yes, catch and release exists even beyond our borders, even in South Africa. We've seen people being accused of corruption and they're continuing to hold public office without consequence. But even in our country, I think our biggest undoing in this country, beyond even corruption issues, is inefficiency at the level of the police and our prosecutors. I think the Chief Justice was right a few years ago when they said they must get rid of people who are unqualified. With the greatest respect, they were doing a great job, but they should not continue holding that office. Why do I say that? the way you read a charge sheet, you realize Buddha. It's very easy. Even a first year law student can represent the accused person and get away with it. Why? Because people fail to frame the charge sheet. People fail to frame the charges. People fail to maybe show how they could prefer the charges to the accused person. So you see, today Taure is arrested for maybe for abuse of authority, maybe for swindling money from prospective, maybe through entrepreneurship. You realize that the way the charges will be framed, I don't know if it's deliberate. Maybe if it is deliberate, then I would agree with you that there's a catch and release program in this country. But if that isn't deliberate, if that is not deliberate, then it's sheer incompetence that is allowing our people to continuously go unscathed when they engage in corrupt activities. They know that the police will fail to maybe investigate properly, or at least prefer the charges that should be preferred in a court of law and fail to submit evidence.
So it's a question of incompetence versus corruption.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily corruption all the time. Sometimes
it's you see that this is incompetence because there is a will to prosecute, but then people fail to to structure their case to then, because a criminal case is obviously won or lost on not on a balance of probabilities, but on reasonable doubt. Beyond reasonable doubt. So if you fail to present the evidence beyond reasonable doubt, then you lose it. And the country will not understand. That's how we get up and see Taurai was accused of swindling 5 million. We saw him even flaunting the money, but then he's moving around.
Okay. So toning down.
Yes.
How do you think corruption affects the youth? Are we affected by corruption?
Yes.
How do you think it affects us?
Obviously, you would have limited access to resources. Because as a young person, if the people who came before me in this country, who were born before me, were corrupt, you realize that there will be an equal distribution of resources and wealth. So there's a saying that says, if you're a Zimbabwean, so that inequality as far as resources distribution is very dangerous, and you can even die poor. Not because it is of your own making, but you will come from a poor background because the resources were unequally distributed, and you become the poor background when you grow old because the resources are still unequally distributed. Yes, and it also erodes trust in our institutions. Right now, how do you think a 10-year-old who goes to school in a combi every morning feels about the police when every morning the combi driver in the combi in which she uses to go to school always passes by the police officers and gives them a $5 note, and she's seeing that? Does she grow up trusting the police? Does she grow up trusting our institutions? So when we tell young people that they are institutions, you see, our constitution in section 7, it says that we must teach our young people, even those who are in public office, the tenets of our constitution. Section 7 says that we must engage in public advocacy, in teaching the public about the constitution. So when you teach a child that there's Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, there is the police, there are institutions that are meant to deal with corruption, deal with other issues, but then they see these institutions not functioning properly, where you have to pay for you to be able to get the services, it erodes trust. And then the other thing is that it generally breeds inequality. There is a young man out there right now who is corruptly getting a tender to do something. Right now, as you speak, every minute, there is someone who is engaging in corruption at a larger or smaller scale. And I'm seated here. How do you think 10 minutes from now, our income will be like? And also, it erodes the culture of hard work in young people. So, these days, Kune is non-zimbing.
Yeah.
So, imagine if your heroes in a country are the people who are allegedly corrupt. So, a few years ago, our young people were taught what was called the National Pledge, where the dignity of hard work was emphasized, which was good. But
I think it's also in NDS1, the
yes,
National Development Strategy. They also mentioned that.
The dignity of hard work. But then your heroes, social media, and because our people are living, so you were talking about people always living on their phones. You said the tablet generation. iPad babies. So if you're an iPad baby, you spend your time on Facebook, on Instagram, and everything, and the heroes that you see, the people we are glorifying these days, are the people whose hard work cannot be traced. So you teach a child that there is what is called the dignity of hard work, but then they see their father who is working very hard, not exactly making it. So in the end, young people lose trust in institutions. They lose trust in the dignity of hard work, and we are breeding inequality as we go. And in the end, we are also breeding right now the generation that are coming after us, even our generation. We are normalizing corruption. So in the end, when you normalize corruption, we have corrupted an entire society. So you firstly engage in corruption, and then you corrupt the entire society. So we are creating a very bad precedent, a very terrible example, and a very sad generation that is corrupt by nature and normalizes everything that is corrupt.
Wow, that's heavy. And I won't lie to you, I feel very discouraged from what you've said so far. Because you're telling me that at the moment I was born, I had already lost one.
Yes.
I was already at 1-0
yes.
in the losing, on the losing side. So I'm a member of the youth for a few more years. Very soon I'll be the poor background, like you're saying. What can I do? What can the youth do to push back against corruption? We have this project and we have this podcast called #Youth for Integrity. What can youth who are seeking integrity do?
The first thing is obviously joining hands with organizations like ZIMCODD, like TIZ, who are fighting against corruption. That is the first port of call, because there are experts there who know how to do that, who can identify what corruption is. Because there's a young person out there who doesn't even know the forms and types of corruption that exist in our society. So the first port of call is obviously joining and supporting anti-corruption organizations. Number 2, be an example yourself. Like you said, you are an elderly youth, right? Senior youth. So be an example to your younger brothers and sisters. Be an example to those young people who are who live in your street. Also, ensure that let's use technology to fight corruption. It's possible to do that. Imagine if we could take pictures of your driver trying to bribe a police officer. Imagine if you could record a live video of somebody asking for a favor for them to do what is required of them to do for you. Imagine if you are using social media to raise awareness against corruption, to raise awareness on corruption, and also educate others. Because, like I said, Section 7 of the Constitution mandates the government, civil society, and everyone else. It puts that mandate on everyone, on everyone's shoulders, to educate everybody about the Constitution, about the basic tenets that everybody must live by. So those founding principles found in Section 3 of the Constitution, and those in Section 194 of the Constitution around the principles of good public administration, we should be able to educate each other about them in the best form of language. I think we were talking about being too rigid in as far as our conversations are going.
Yes.
So we could reduce how we speak about these things to the language best understood by the young person in the ghetto out there, by the young person in Chendambuya out there. So we could educate each other and ourselves in the best, simplest of languages, number 1. Number 2, we can join anti-corruption initiatives by ZIMCODD, by TIZ, and even by ZAC itself. And also maybe we should be able to report corruption whenever we see it and demand accountability. I remember you had a How Far campaign.
Yes. Demand
accountability. Because sometimes if your government promised that this year we are going to space, what was that geospatial, what?
Yeah.
It had a budget allocation in 2023. What happened to it?
Yes.
That's the first port of call. We are recently on the 3rd of April, President Mnangagwa declared the drought a national disaster. Then how do we trace the steps that he's going to take in as far as alleviating that drought and poverty that he intends to do? What steps does he take? What steps does Parliament take in terms of Section 119 of the Constitution, holding him to account? How do you hold Parliament to account? How do we attend council budget consultations? Do we go to council and demand their 2023 budget? So there are things that we overlook that we should be doing as young people. So instead of saying there is corruption, we should be able to point it out that the city of Chakati said they 3 million in their account in 2023. How did they use it? We have a duty and a right in terms of the Freedom of Information Act to get that information.
But let's be real here. You mentioned the fact that we have a constitutional right.
Yes.
And yes, we have a constitutional right.
Yes.
But we're also experiencing shrinking civil space. Human rights defenders are being arrested for prolonged periods of time and not being able to access justice.
I've been a guest of the state myself.
You have?
Yes.
So you see, so you would be best to even tell me, because I haven't, but you would be best positioned to tell me, how do we navigate that? I like the fact that you mentioned we're in the digital era, yes, and we're iPad babies. So we're already on our phones.
Yes.
Instead of looking for those stories that are trending, we won't mention the names.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. But how then do we use our phones? How then do we use the internet? How then do we use our social media for us to campaign for the anti-corruption drive, or for us to campaign for maybe even this one, the Youth for Integrity campaign? How do we push that forward as young people?
I think joining structured campaigns, like I said before. So because there is power in numbers. There surely is power in numbers. So instead of Tapiwa Nashe going out there fighting corruption on his own, why not join the SIA campaign itself?
Yeah.
And fight corruption as a group? There is protection in numbers. There is protection in working with established organizations that have the mandate, that have at law been given the mandate to do that.
Yes.
So you can fight corruption with ZIMCODD. You can fight corruption with TIZAD. You can fight corruption with the young people under the SIA project. And also, you can fight corruption in ways that you could in many creative ways on social media, just ensuring that you stay on the safe side of the law, and where possible, do what is necessary.
As ZIMCODD, we have two hashtags that are running right now. One is hashtag Youth for Integrity, hashtag Youth for Integrity, and hashtag SIA Corruption. So hashtag SIYA Corruption and hashtag Youth for Integrity. So if there are any listeners right now who think they have a contribution to make to this conversation on corruption, on integrity, please feel free to send in your thoughts on social media under those two hashtags. Tapiwa, just winding down, we've had this conversation, and we know these conversations have been had before. But what we're looking for now is youth for integrity, literally that people will find it within themselves to say, no, I will not take this, I will not take this drink, I will not participate in entrepreneurship, because let's be real, these are bread and butter issues. The reason why someone is engaging in entrepreneurship is probably to feed their family. The reason why people emulate the behavior of the Mbingas is because they're in a position where they see that their education is not helping them, because, like you said before, our institutions are not working. Are you making a pledge? Are you, as an individual, making a commitment to not taking Zino, to not taking a drink?
More than that. Number one, I'm making a commitment not to take or give Zino. But number two, I'm making a commitment to fight to ensure that there are consequences for those who do. Why do I do that? So that those examples that we usually want to emulate, they become what we don't want to become. So I'm making a commitment not to give or take Zino, and ensure that there are serious consequences for those who do.
Slot it in. Okay, Tapio, just winding down, could you please maybe give us your thoughts or maybe recommendations on how the youth can participate and how we can fight corruption as a country and as the youth?
So maybe as a country, we should strengthen and reform our institutions. The Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission must be a dog with teeth that can bite. People must be scared when they hear about the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission. Number one, so we strengthen and reform our institutions. Number two, we should ensure that we inculcate a culture of honesty. We should reward people who are accountable. We should reward people who are honest. Number three, we should ensure that we educate and teach ourselves and others about the constitution itself and the laws of this country pertaining to corruption and good public administration and the founding principles that guide the foundation of this country in terms of section 3 of the constitution. So I would just give those three. Number one, strengthening and reforming our institutions. Number two, ensuring that there's consequence for those who engage in corruption. Number three, educating ourselves, educating others about the constitution and the tenets, the basic tenets of public administration.
Hashtag no Zino.
No Zino.
Thank you so much, Tapio. It's been a very enriching conversation. I wish you the best in all your endeavors and hope to have you again here very soon.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll give you our social media handles again. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, X, and Spotify under Zimbabwe Coalition on Data and Development. And thanks again to the U.S. Agency for Aid and Development, USAID, for supporting us under the SIA project. Thank you so much, listeners. See you in the next episode.